Hi, welcome to cracking the late addition to the Drukhari Index episode 1. This is for the Skysplinter Assault, and you may have noticed we have got a special guest this week.
Hello.
When we can, we like to get, a highly skilled player, someone who has a lot of experience with a faction, who might have wins at events, do really well at events. I will admit this one was easier to do because he is on our team. How are you doing today, Tom, and how are you feeling about Skysplinter Assault?
I am very good, and I'm really enjoying Skysplinter Assault. It's a lot of fun. I had a great weekend playing it at Saffron Slam, and it hits the sweet spot for me in terms of what it does and how the army now plays. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with it.
Yeah, I feel like the mechanics might be slightly different for the person playing it, but the end result feels very much like 8th and 9th edition Drukhari, where you're doing the things that made them so frustrating for me to play against.
Yes, with some important caveats, which we'll get to, but 100%, it has a lot of that same sort of damage and output and aggression at times, but perhaps played a little bit more defensively than previously. But we'll explore why.
Excellent. So in next Drukhari, what do you get from this? First of all, power from pain. You get this at all times. Nice and easy. If your faction is Drukhari, you can become empowered through pain using the tokens that you generate, pain tokens. You start with 3 pain tokens, and each time you destroy an enemy unit, you gain a pain token. Each time an enemy unit fails a battle shock test, you gain a pain token. That sounds great, but what can I spend those pain tokens on, Tom?
Well, you can empower yourself. You can do it in the movement charge phase, or you can do it in the shooting or fight phase. If you're empowering your movement or charges, you can just reroll your advance or reroll your charge. This is a really nice thing to have. Obviously, in a CP-starved universe, if you're looking at that charge and just thinking, I need to make sure I get there, and I need my CP for something else, then just slapping an empowerment on it is a big deal. And so knowing when to use this is really important. It can also obviously help you make up ground to get to points early in the game. Obviously, for shooting in fight phase, it gives you full rerolls to hit, which is amazing. And thanks to recent balance changes, an additional point of AP, which is basically Games Workshop saying, sorry for the one that we took off you for no reason, have it back. Which gets Drukhari back to that kind of AP 2-3, killy, stabby, go through power armory kind of place. Which is where they need to be, because that's part of the army's kind of design philosophy. Is they're elite killers. That's what they do. Certainly, power armor, they go through that. So this has done enormous amounts for Drukhari, getting them back to a place where the combat is now relevant as well as the shooting.
I now look at Incubi and go,
yeah, they're very different now.
You can hear from our voices which one of us is the Drukhari player and which one of us has played against Drukhari a lot.
Incubi sing. I have 20 Incubi now. I've never had 20 before. It's great.
You just made my skin crawl when you said that, Tom. Oh my god. Flashbacks.
That's all well and good. You get additional bonuses for being in Detachment. Reign of Cruelty, what does that give you?
So Reign of Cruelty, this is where, and I'm going to emphasize this a lot, I think what they really wanted to do with Skysplinter was really hone in on that relationship between infantry and transports, which is kind of the heart of what Drukhari are. It's a big part of their aesthetic and how they play. So this is very simple. Drukhari units that are disembarking from transports gain, until the end of the turn, ignores cover on guns, fantastic, but also lance on melee weapons, so +1 to wound. So an enormous improvement in reliability, particularly in combat where lance helps all of the low strength weapons that the melee infantry have get into a genuinely threatening place, into almost any target, right? Because we'll talk about it later, but if you have wound rerolls, for example, then wounding on 5 suddenly is still great. And if you're going into just standard infantry, being able to wound on 4s with most of the melee infantry, with the volume of attacks that they have rerolling their hits, makes them very dependable. The ignores cover is great on Cabalites. That's the only use I've really seen it put to so far, and it's certainly not nothing, but it's not the real juice. The juice is the lance.
And it feels like most of the time that's going to be improving the wound roll by 50%. And improving the amount of saves that your opponent fails by 50%, which is, if anyone can do math, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Because, I mean, I don't know if people have played into Drukhari before this, but Drukhari combat units just didn't hurt anything. No. So this juices them all the way to now trades with equivalent types of units. And in the case of Archon and Incubi, where you can have full hit and wound rerolls going on, just goes through most things, really, if it does manage to get into it, which is really, really nice.
An interesting one is if a transport was blown up and you disembarked out, you'd have lance. So that then, as an opponent, I wouldn't necessarily want to charge a unit that's come out of a blown up transport, because if I don't kill them, or you can interrupt, that will really hurt.
Yeah,
There's
it's
some weird interactions, right?
Yeah, that is a weird one. I guess it would, because that is a disembarkation.
That's the only buff that can go on a unit that is fallen out of a transport that's been destroyed.
They'll be battle shocked, but they'll have lance.
If you're listening, make sure that you pack enough melee output to kill a unit of T3 elves after you've demeched them. And then you'll be all right.
Do you have Space Marines with basic attacks? If so, you're probably fine.
Yeah, exactly that.
But I like that. That was the one thing I saw for this.
They're like, oh, we're really angry now, and now we're dead. But
I think it's worth talking about because, let's be honest, Raiders do not, they're made out of paper. And if you can get an angle on them, they will be destroyed. So it's going to happen.
It. And so this is where the defensive thing I mentioned earlier on comes in, because if you go gung-ho and shove all your transports in the enemy's face and they all get lost, you also lose these abilities, right? You don't get them if you get sort of caught out. You don't get them if the enemy gets into your transports. You have to be pushing and hiding from deep and counter-attacking a lot of the time at the right moments to make sure you get this. Obviously, there's various ways, which we'll talk about, for also recycling your units back into transports, which again, if you're too aggressive, you're going to lose all of that because your transports are dead. So the incentive for the Drukhari player now is to play slightly more cagely, slightly more defensively, striking from vantage points, because the longer your transports are alive, the better the detachment is, which I think is a really nice way of balancing it. It's not just you have all this stuff all the time, it's you have to protect the sort of economy of stuff that gets you what you need.
Saves us from the horror of released 9th edition Drukhari. Yeah.
It's not I shove entire army in face. No. That would end really sadly, I think, for the Drukhari player at this moment.
No. All right, so enhancements. John, do you want to give us a run through on what we've got here?
Yeah, so for the suite, we've got this first one here, Phantasmal Smoke for 20 points. So it's a Drukhari model. While the bearer's unit is wholly within 6 inches of a friendly transport, models of the bearer's unit have the benefits of cover and stealth ability. So stealth is -1 to hit. So pretty nice, healthy package. And if you're that close to a transport, I imagine there's other things that could then help you shoot and then get back in as well, potentially in the package. So feels like a really nice thing where you just kind of like, if you're getting out, you're then not getting overwatched, perhaps, or some sort of reactive kind of approach to. You're trying to deter them, aren't you, really, as much as anything?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's quite a fun one, and I think there's certain units that do benefit, like the court's already obnoxious to wound if we're getting a court out of a transport. Incubi, obviously, 3-up save, so cover, nothing. And yet you could put this on a Beastmaster and just have them running next to a transport, and then you've got loads of wounds that are, kind of negatives to hit. But I think, in general, the general feeling for Drukhari players is, don't waste time trying to make your Drukhari more survivable, because they're not, and it doesn't matter. 20 points isn't going to change that, right? This buff isn't going to change that. These units are going to die, so put all your juice into making them kill things is how we tend to feel.
Makes sense to me. All right, so next up.
So Spiteful Raider, which is for 10 points. This is one of my favourite ones. Each time the bearer's unit destroys an enemy unit in the fight phase, if they were within range of one or more objective markers when the bearer's unit was selected to fight, you gain an additional pain token. So that would get you 2 pain tokens, correct?
Yes, that is right. I think if it was a unit with a character, it would be more, but I'm not sure. I think it does work that way, but I need to double check as well. So yeah, it's great. It's good harvesting. You can imagine with the 10-point price, this literally just goes in or doesn't go in depending on how your list looks. It's really nice. If you have that 10 points over, you put it in. I think it's very nice to have a kind of way of farming a few extra tokens early on with little chaff units and trading units, but it's also probably the first thing you cut if you're like, I must have the units to make this particular expression. I put this in more often than not so far. I think it's good. The only trouble I have is remembering which Archon I gave it to.
That's interesting, because at first blush to me it looks like it's a take all of the time, but this is someone who hasn't actually had to ration out the pain tokens.
Yeah, sometimes it's purely about what you can fit in the list, and whether if it's a difference between being able to fit, say, a Kronos in who's going to help you harvest tokens across the game or not. Then it's like, I take the Kronos and the extra unit. But it is, for 10 points, it's really, really good. So if you could make the points for it, you should take it.
Fantastic. All right.
So then we've got Sadistic Fulcrum for 15 points, which is Drukhari model again. Each time you expend a pain token to empower the bearer's unit in the shooting phase, you can select one or more friendly Drukhari transports within 3 inches of the bearer's unit. Until the end of the phase, the transport is also empowered. So
potentially really good.
So I saw this and then immediately went and I was like, isn't there a big, massive transport called
Yeah.
Tantalus
Is it
that you can-
tantalizing?
Yeah.
put units in? And then I was like, wait, instead of doing this and jumping through hoops, because I probably don't care about empowering the unit that comes out of it in the shooting phase, maybe I just spend the pain token on the Tantalus in the shooting phase and don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The setup is the concern, but it's actually a funny detachment because the Tantalus synergizes with literally everything in it incredibly well. I still don't think you take the Tantalus most of the time,
Oh.
but it just combos so well. So I mean, if we're talking really stupid, if you wanted to squeeze this up big time, right? The Tantalus can fit 16 models in it. You split Cabalites with 3 Venoms, so you have just the idiot Cabalites in the Venoms. Then you have a bunch of Dark Lances, blasters, and all the fun guns, and you have an Archon with this in one of the 5s. The Tantalus drives up. The 5-man with the Cabalite guy and the Archon get out. You empower them. It also empowers the Tantalus. Then you've got full rerolls to hit and wound on the Archon's unit with a bunch of special guns and all of the Tantalus's guns plus 2 good halves of Cabalite guns on top. That would be a lot of output. But it's just all of the setup involved to do all of those things.
I don't see what the downside could possibly be here. As someone who's never seen a Tantalus in physical space, I'm sure there's no way that this could cause any sort of. Could you just hold your hands up to maybe describe the sort of size a Tantalus takes up on the board?
Takes out about that much space.
So you're
it's
saying
quite big.
you're saying it's a lot of pointy-eared eggs in one very big basket.
It's as hard to hide as a Land Raider or a Monolith in a meta
Which
in
hide
which
typically
people
well.
are in a meta
in
in
your
which people
opponent's
are already
deployment zone.
preparing to kill those things, which are twice as durable as a Tantalus.
No,
That's the issue the Tantalus has.
I like
But
it. It's fun.
we do want to try this. So you could definitely try it on. So the Archon and a Cabalite 5-man are the best candidate for this because then they get out, they shoot, and the transport gets juiced up as well. But it's working out what transport you'd have with them that you would want to juice up to make it worth it. There's a combination play there. I just like my Archon with Incubi. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's fair. So moving on to the last enhancement that doesn't make you lose something.
Yeah. So the Nightmare Shroud, which is 20 points. Drukhari model again, funnily enough. Each time the bearer's unit disembarks from a transport, until the end of the turn, enemy units cannot use the Fire Overwatch stratagem to shoot at the bearer's unit. So
Terrible,
I'm imagining you put that on one of those incubi blobs that you're just talking about, so that someone can't shoot Overwatch at them,
Yeah, exactly.
and then you make them die.
Yes, John. Has that ever happened to you?
Maybe last week in a Crusade game. It was quite sad because my orcs were like, "Cool, we're going to use this CP
You had
that we're
your
not using." For
flamer
anything."
buggy and everything just stood right there.
Livid.
No. So, I mean, this is an Archon with this is probably the first thing you put in a Skysplinter list. It's just so good. And it gives you a real a way to control space. And it really flips the way a lot of lists have been playing at the moment because a lot of armies are very used to having their big Overwatch threat that's going to control the center of the board one way or the other. And you go, what if instead I just killed that? You can't do anything about it. How does the middle and the space game now play? And so I've been running this on a 10-man of Incubi. You're going to hear Drukhari players debating, is a 10-man enough? Is a 5-man enough? And you'll hear various different takes on this. Obviously, a Raider is harder to hide into position. It's not as easy to use a 10-man, but sometimes you want 10 Incubi to just completely delete things.
I don't feel like it's necessarily worthwhile putting on a 5 model unit, surely.
Only to have that middle of the board space controller that they can't stop doing its thing. That's the logic. I think that this is the thing. It's if you've played against Drukhari in the early parts of the edition, and I certainly played it, what Drukhari players found very early on was, well, I just lose a unit to Overwatch every turn. So how do I get good engagement with the enemy going when that's the case? And this says, what if that isn't the case? And then that forces a slightly different pattern of play from the opponent, which I really like. But yeah, 10-man of Incubi is just the one. I just love it. It's so good.
Fantastic. All right, but that's not it. There are a list of stratagems here, and I'm sure there's no way that the stratagems make, some pointy-eared bullshit. You want to take us through these, John?
Yeah, so starting off with our one battle tactic. Obviously, they don't Drukhari don't have a way of getting free battle tactics, do they, Tom?
No, so they have Vect, but they don't have free battle tactics.
So it's more that it could be Vected or a similar sort of ability.
Exactly that.
So Skyborn Annihilation. So in your shooting phase, one Drukhari unit from your army that has disembarked from a transport and has not been selected to shoot. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons gain sustained hits 1 or sustained hits 2 if they're a Cabalite warrior unit.
Yeah.
So, horrible.
So it's just very funny because if you're empowering a Cabalite squad and you're re-rolling your hits, there's 3 dark light weapons in there. There's a splinter cannon with sustain 1, and this isn't going to just delete things, but what this does is turn your like 55 points of Cabalites into something that can blast a more expensive unit. Mine cleared out a 6-man of Von Ryan's Leapers with this at the weekend by just sidling up to them and just going blah, 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 and just absolutely spraying the shots on. So yeah, it's not one you'll use all the time, but situationally it just turns that little Cabalite squad into a genuine heavy hitter for a turn when you need it.
I look forwards to taking 9 Dark Lance shots into one of my units from a 55-point Cabalite unit, just because my opponent's gone, I hit with all of them, but I didn't get any sustained hits. I'm just going to fish 666.
Yeah. Exactly.
Brilliant. So then straight on to the next one, Vicious Blades. So in the fight phase, just after a Drukhari transport from your army has selected its targets. That transport, after it has fought, select one enemy unit that was the target of one or more of the attacks and roll 1d6 for each model embarked within your transport, adding 1 to the result if the embarked model is a Rax model. For each 5 up, you suffer a mortal wound, up to 6. So it is capped, but my goodness, mortal wounds.
Yeah, so this is the only one I've not actually used yet, which gives you some idea. It's very situational. It's not that it's bad, it's that once we've got down this list, you'll realise you want to use all of these. You really do. Yeah. And you don't, just Drukhari don't have any way to boost CP. No. So they are on what they get per turn, plus if they chuck a card away. That is it. So it is hard to use all of these. And this is the one that tends to miss out. Rax giving this mortal wounds on 4-ups is pretty funny. So if you had a Tantalus full of Rax, that's doing 8 mortal wounds. No. Again, the Tantalus is just the one for all of these stratagems.
Yeah, capped at 6, so you don't even really need the Rax if you're putting it in the Tantalus.
It's true.
You can put good units in the Tantalus instead.
Yeah, you could. I love Rax, but they're not good. And yeah, so obviously, again, I'm just going to talk about the Tantalus one more time, just for those that do want
just
to try.
Just in case.
The Tantalus impact mortal wounds of its own when it impacts. You could tank shock with it, and you could do this. So that is 3 lots of mortal wounds. So a Tantalus would do quite a surprising amount of mortals if you had 2 CP and drove it full of people into something. So do that if you want. Yeah, it's fun. It doesn't tend to make the cut, but it's fun.
That is actually interesting. How well did Drukhari tend to deal with Catan?
They don't. So the Tantalus might be the way.
Yeah, because you're doing, 12 mortal wounds, becoming 8 after Field of Pains. That's 2/3 of a Catan.
Yeah, I've not played the Catan matchup yet.
All you're doing is taking an inefficient unit and throwing it away. So this seems like a solid battle.
How many points is a Catan?
Oh, not enough. Sub 300.
Yeah, and so a Tantalus loaded with all this stuff is going to cost more than that.
A Tantalus is 230, so basics almost touching a Catan.
Yeah, and so I just think the investment isn't going to pay off.
So that's not trading.
As a combination in dealing with a Catan, it might be one of those tools that actually does help in a key moment.
Yeah, just dodge Necrons, it'll be fine. All right. What else have we got?
And Drukhari in general is just, if you can just dodge a lot of the field, they're really, really good.
All those lovely mortal wounds would be great, apart from if you're going into Custodies, and then half of them would disappear anyway.
We're not even talking about Custodies.
Yeah. So then, the next one, Wraith-like Retreat, which is at the end of the fight phase. 1 Drukhari infantry unit from your army that has fought this phase. Mm-hmm. That unit can make a normal or fallback move, unless it's a Witch's unit, which it must end wholly within 3 inches horizontally or 5 vertically of a friendly Drukhari transport, and must embark within that transport at the end of the move. Yeah, so you're just essentially hopping back in, right?
This is money, yeah. So you can fight. You can obviously consolidate first. So if you're on a point, there's more movement available here, even than the move back in. So you can be about 10, 11 inches away from a transport, kill something, and still get back in this, which is extremely good. So again, that 10-man hammer unit that can't be overwatched can go out, blap something, run away, hide, and say, do you want to try again? Which is exactly what happened in one of my games at Saffron, where they went out, killed 10 Hellblasters, and then hid away, and then came out next time and did it again. And so that is incredibly powerful. Now, the application of this I've not really used yet is that witches can move anywhere. They don't have to go in the transport. So there's definitely like primary stealing play with this by chucking witches further up into places that they don't want them to be. I think the issue with witches is always getting there and whether they're really that worth it if they're not transporting Lilith. When they've got Lilith in there, they definitely are worth it. But the main use this has, as far as I see, is you take your hammer units and you just keep dragging them back to safety every turn. Because Venoms have a natural end of fight phase disembarkation anyway, or re-embarkation anyway. So you can potentially have 20 incubi, 1 brick has come out of a raider, 2 squads have come out of it of Venoms, they kill all the things they're fighting, and they all jump back into transports afterwards, which is very funny.
I guess positioning is very key here because
so key.
With how charging works now in 10th edition, you may go much further than you want to.
Yes,
which is
exactly that. So a lot of the time in Drukhari, that's why the transports go too, and they go and fight and play and join in. But again, finding places where you can actually get away with this is not easy, and that's the general thing with all of the combination plays in here is that they're all clever and they're all fun. But if you start losing your transports and you get stuff caught out of position, it just crumbles.
Very finesse based, which is kind of what Drukhari feel like they should be, rather than just an actual hammer.
It's what they're
it
about.
Should be a knife, right?
Yeah.
So next one, pounce on the prey. So in your movement phase, just after a Drukhari unit from your army has disembarked from a transport that made a normal move this phase, that infantry unit until the end of the turn is eligible to declare a charge. It's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
So it's basically giving assault ramps, essentially.
That's exactly what it's doing. Assault ramp on tap on transports that move 14 inches, which is very nice.
Whenever I play, Drukhari, I come away from the game going, they didn't have enough mobility. I wish they had more mobility. And here we are. They have more mobility.
Come round a little bit further. Cover us from that side.
I wish we still had old fly. Can you imagine?
No.
Yes,
it is still good. In practice, it ends up being a sort of 10-inch from cover plus 3-inch disembark plus charge, which is still massive reach and helps them a lot. It helps because you can position units to avoid, again, ones that aren't Overwatch immune. You can just move the transport, position them, and then attack something, which helps a lot. This is actually where the Raider comes in better because Venoms do die to Overwatch big time. Raiders are generally less likely to do that. So the Raider's quite nice for this. And the other thing with this, obviously, is that disembarkation, as ruled recently, doesn't trigger run away, jump away, teleport type stuff. So you move your transport 9.1 inches away, you disembark 3 6-inch charge into whatever was hoping to run away from you or teleport away from you. So yeah, it's got a lot of use, this. And it just, again, changes your half of the board from somewhere where you can't push out to wherever there are transports, you actually do have means to suddenly make a push into enemy territory, which is really nice.
Right, so the next one, Sweeping Mockery, which feels kind of related to what we were just talking about, which is your opponent's movement phase just after an enemy unit has ended a normal move, advance, or fallback. One Drukhari transport from your army that's not within engagement range and is within 9, it can make a normal move up to 6 inches. So maybe a transport that's just had some incubi get back in, that they're thinking, oh, we'll just go crack it open and tie them up. Nope, they're going backwards, right?
Hear me out. You can steal the objective with an OC5 Tantalus.
Yes, you can.
Ed.
Yes, you can.
Where was this Ed when we had monoliths to talk about?
Where is the most bang for your buck? It is the Tantalus once again. But it's, I mean, this is good. Actually using it properly, I've still not quite figured it out. I've used it a few times to middling kind of effect. 6-inch move when someone's genuinely coming to get you isn't that far, but it is quite fun and it does create problems, definitely.
Yeah, and because it's on a transport, you also can't do the now I'm on the other side of the wall, an inch away.
Exactly that. So it's not quite as powerful as is on infantry.
And it doesn't necessarily stop you having a thing where someone's trying to kill a unit that started the turn on an objective, because you're moving off an objective, but you still count for that secondary for whatever it's called.
And there's not many objectives where you can be like just on it and then run away or anything like that, which would be fun to do. But there will be sudden moments in the game when this is awesome, but you are going to have to be constantly looking out for it. Don't just hit that button because you can. Make sure it's actually worth doing.
I think it's one of those classics where it's I have a strat that makes my opponent have to play significantly more cautiously, and I will spend the CP every other game.
Yes, exactly that. You tell them they have it, and then they play weird to stop it.
You remind them that you have it.
Exactly that. Which is interesting. It's the same with the Nightmare Shroud, 10-man Incubi. A lot of this army's power is in what it could do. I spent in the actual final game, which is a very tough game into Grey Knights, I spent 5 turns pretending I was going to hit him really hard and never doing it. And then in the 5th turn, I hit him really hard because I had no choice. But for the whole game, it's what if I did? And it's him Dimosing away because he's worried about getting blatted, and me just flipping primary and other things, and you're like, I can't actually get you, and I'm not gonna get you because I need to stay alive for longer, but I'm just pretending I might,
A lot of these, not just in this, but in codexes we've already discussed, like the Marines, the Necrons, a lot of these reactive ones are kind of ones that you don't use that often. I think it is always just the threat of it, and it's more if your opponent misplays that you get to use it.
Yeah, they punish like the single gambly commit, don't they? Like long distance effort with one unit to get somewhere. You just go, nah.
It's encouraging the better behaviors, right?
A lot of the time, if you're into something that's seriously coming to get you, moving one boat is not going to help.
Right, and then finally, we've got a war gear stratagem that is called Night Shield. So your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its targets, one Drukhari vehicle from your army that was selected as the target by one or more attacking units' attacks. Until the end of the phase, they get a 4-up invuln. Yeah, there we go.
It's fun. It's exactly the same thing, actually, where what this punishes is a half-assed effort to engage with you, right? If you're like, I'll just sling one dreadnought at your Ravager and that'll take care of it, you're like, now it's got a 4-up. You needed more than that.
Yeah.
And it's the same for just keeping a boat alive in a crucial moment. And Drukhari vehicles have a 6-up invuln now, 4-up saves. So that's being able to do this sometimes is a big deal. So, again, it's not one you'll use all the time, but if there's just someone half-arsing dealing with your vehicle, it's really nice.
Your opponent's got limited units that can shoot. They've got 3 dreadnoughts. They need to deal with 2 raiders. And you go, I like my odds here. I'm getting some primary next turn.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
There we go. That is
lovely.
Quite a nice stratagem,
right? Yeah. It's a very fun 6, I think. There's not really any duds. You can use all of those. So that's definitely fun.
And I like that there isn't one like look at and go, every turn I'm going to save my CP just to throw that in blindly.
No, exactly. I think some combination of disembarking after moving and getting back in the boat. That's the best 1-2 from these.
Yeah.
But it's when there's moments in the game that's relevant.
Lovely. All right, so moving on to the list. Now, this is the reason that we have Tom on, because this is the list that he did just win the Saffron Slam with.
Yay!
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
So, as you can see, you have played Knifey Spoony before.
I have. It was not my first rodeo.
Yeah, it turns out if you bring 20 Incubi, you go, that's not a knife, this is a knife.
That is a knife. This is a clave.
It truly is. Some of the knives that you can bring. So walk us through the list, and then we'll have a quick chat about it.
I'm going to shout out Rob Kimpton of 6++ fame as well, because he and I have been sort of chatting Drukhari every day for about, however long it's been since the rules came out. So this leans into a lot of what we both agree is good, with a few things that I kind of went with that are kind of more my style versus Rob's. So I think Drukhari players in general landed on the fact that whether you like it or not, you do need some shooting. You need some ways of keeping the opponent honest, and you also want to not build lists that just give up max, bring it down, and assassinate. You want to avoid doing that because that's too easy for an army that gets tabled a lot of the time. You don't want to make it all the points are easily had straight away. So that's where Scourge come in. Scourge give you Dark Lances. They give you a Haywire option for anti-vehicle, anti-hard targets like Monoliths or Land Raiders. They can fire and fade. And I put a Ravager in there as well. He's made it on here, but there is a Ravager in the list as well with triple Dark Lance, and that gives you your kind of fire base. And the Ravager doesn't really need pain tokens to sing, but the Scourge do. So Ravagers don't need pain tokens to be effective. Scourge do, so you have to use them very carefully and not pain token them all the time. And you've got a Kronos there to help regenerate their tokens. That the Kronos usually babysits them, and they will fire and fade and get you some early kills before the combat gets to work. In terms of the scoring, I've got a few little bits for scoring. So mandrakes jump up and down. You've got a rack squad can go and do tasks. There it will always be the Cabalites are split by a venom into 2 5s, so they can go and do jobs as well, as can their venom. And the Beastmaster is very nice. Beastmaster's very cheap wound, bunch of cheap wounds with some output that have a scout move 9, move 12. So you can shove that places. And what that does is go and score cards that need you to be far away, or it blocks the enemy in on one side, or kind of slightly limits their ability to come and deal with you in the early phases of the game. So that's the kind of scoring dimension that supports the list. And then in terms of combat output, the money is in the Witches with Lilith, which is a really good anti-infantry blender unit that can also just slap wounds on most things. And the triple Archon with Incubi 110, 2 5s. Now, I think quite a lot of people are on less Incubi than that. I think some people like 110, 1.5. I like the additional 5 with an Archon because what I've been doing with that is that Venom's in Deep Strike and I'm going to ingress it in somewhere and they're going to come out and punch you in a soft bit somewhere that you don't want to get punched. So they took back objectives like nobody's business all weekend. They were very, very good for that. And so I just like that because then you've got your 2 units for controlling your own defensive areas and then 1 that's going to come and find a weak spot somewhere and go and exploit enemy space. So the balance of the list is very, very, pretty much 50-50 between being able to shoot and stand off and being able to get in and do combat. But it's got plenty of secondary scoring shored up and lots of units to throw away as well.
It looks good. It looks terrifying. This is exactly the sort of Dark Elder list. All of the things I recognize from 8th and 9th edition. Maybe not the Beastmaster, but
but that's nice, right?
Classics. Yeah, it is good. No, it's great.
It's a bit of everything.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it. I think it is a very well-rounded army once again, where all of the different tools. I mean, really, it is a movement, shoot, and fighting army. That's what it does. It doesn't have a sort of an exceptional talent in any of those things because the fragility always sort of counterbalances the output. But it's now very good at doing all of the things, and it does all of them well enough to keep you very much in games and to put the opponent away if they expose things too much.
All it took was Games Workshop removing the psychic phase to suddenly have an army that plays in every phase.
Yeah, exactly that.
Everything. Lovely. Before we wrap up, are there any changes that you're thinking of making before you take this to another event, or are you pretty happy with it?
I really liked it. I felt it played super well. I wouldn't change a ton. I think the only the candidates you could look at is it worth having a Kronos? Does that tempt you into spending pain tokens you shouldn't because you might get them back? That's one concern. And then the other areas of possible change are the racks are all well and good, but getting them to where they need to go is sometimes difficult. So they could easily be Reavers, 3 bikers, even more speed and reach. Mm-hmm. And so I'm toying with some lists where the Kronos, Spiteful Raider, and the racks go, and you have 2 3-mans of Reavers, so you just have more. They're OC2 as well, so they can just boop out and get the kind of the sort of get the trading and exchanging going. And also, if you are going full send, they can just take up even more space, so the opponent has nowhere to drop down. So that's one change. But I think the core of this, I'm very, very happy with. I like it a lot.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think keep iterating with this and see how we go is the plan.
Lovely. Well, thank you for joining us. It has been great to have you on. As always, we will be back next week. We don't have any new content to do again, so we will be putting another poll up, see what it is that most interests you that we could discuss.
Can't wait.
Thanks for watching.